Each year, a representative group of graduates of the college, on behalf of all of the graduates, are asked to nominate a member of the faculty to speak on this occasion. This year's faculty speaker is Jennifer Nash, Assistant Professor of American Studies. Professor Nash.
Good afternoon, class of 2013. Let me begin with a confession. I was nervous about speaking in front of all of you today. As I prepared my remarks, I tried to remember my own college graduation. I remember crying when I said goodbye to my roommates. I remembered my parents' stress levels rising as they jammed my boxes into their small car. What surprised me, though, was that I couldn't remember anything that anyone said at graduation. I called my friends to ask what they remembered. Not much, one said. The speaker said something lofty about changing the world. So today, instead of delivering a lofty graduation speech, I decided to talk about something very practical, something from my own experience. I decided to share what was challenging for me as I moved from college to life beyond college. In college, community was ready-made. Friends were always available for late-night pizza or drinks, and there was a steady supply of activities and parties that brought us together. But after college, I had a bunch of friends living in far-flung parts of the city whose schedules were dictated by their jobs. If I wanted to see them, I had to email them a week in advance, and making a plan with more than 2 friends was as complicated as solving a logic game. It took me a long time to figure out how to make community, and much of it I learned from teaching undergraduates, all of you. So today I offer the very condensed version of what I've learned in 3 parts. So first, community requires commitment. I remember this every semester at the beginning of a new class. I walk into a room full of strangers and begin to teach, but the students are hesitant to talk. And as soon as class is over, everyone bolts. As the semester unfolds, something slowly changes. People learn each other's names. Students linger after class, sometimes to ask each other questions, more often to talk about the most recent episode of Breaking Bad. The class develops its own dynamic, its own jokes, its own logic. In short, we become, at least for the hours we are together, a place for each other. This requires something of my students, that they are open to each other, open to saying something silly, open to being wrong. And it requires something of me, that I be willing to ask a hard question that might make someone uneasy, that I be willing to say yes whenever students ask that inevitable question, can I ask you something? Teaching showed me that community doesn't require a fancy space to incubate. It can even happen at 9:35 on a Monday morning in a subterranean lecture hall, as long as we are committed to being present for each other. Second, practice curiosity. One of my professors told me there will always be more things you don't know than things you know. This is a humbling realization and a liberating one too. It means that rather than feigning mastery, we get to ask, what do you mean? Curiosity allows us to interrogate the things that are so ordinary that they seem normal. This fall, students in my American Studies Interracial America course read an article by Frank Wu called Why I Teach at Howard. It's an explanation of why Wu, an Asian American professor, was committed to teaching at a historically Black university. Our conversation took what seemed to be a tangent. I asked my students how many of them had been to Howard, a university that is less than 3 miles from GW, and I wasn't surprised to hear that most of them hadn't. Colleges tend to be insular places, and students usually stay close to campus. But the conversation suddenly took on a slower pace, as if we were getting close to something tender. A man in the second row said, "I'm not sure I'd feel comfortable at Howard." And another responded, "Some people don't always feel comfortable here." The first student quietly turned toward her and asked, "What do you mean?" And an interesting conversation ensued. What I admired about his question, "What do you mean?" was that it didn't come from defensiveness or from an impulse to change his colleague's mind. Rather, it took what she was saying as a truth that he sought to understand. This is what I'm calling practicing curiosity. It means that we engage each other not to decide if the other is credible or correct. Instead, we seek to understand how people who inhabit the very same space we do can experience it so differently. What is it they see that we don't? How can their experiences change our understandings of the world and help us create more expansive and more just communities? Finally, embrace discomfort. My students often confess in office hours, I didn't feel comfortable speaking up in class. My response is always the same: embrace discomfort. College makes this easy for you. Your job is to critically engage each other. But when you leave the carefully crafted community of college, it's easy to surround yourself with people who make you feel comfortable. High school friends, college friends, office friends, the friends with whom you watch Real Housewives. You might find that the most contentious topic you discuss is which Atlanta housewife you prefer, Kenya or Cynthia. Communities based on sameness can be easy. They can also be very boring. What makes college exciting, I think, is disagreement. It's that student in the back of your women's studies class who insists that lean in is all wrong. Or those two students in your American studies class who always debate about Foucault or Kanye. College is a time of tremendous growth because of the people who turn our worlds upside down with their ideas, who unsettle us by asking questions that cut at the heart of what we think. As you venture out into the world, remember that feeling of being pushed, and rather than retreating from it, seek it out. Ultimately, community isn't something you find or fall into, it's something you practice and something you do. As the next part of your life introduces new demands on your time, making community will require a conscious effort. But I urge you to remain committed to it. In a world that so easily fragments us, resist the impulse to treat people as either friends or strangers. Instead, nurture real connections between yourself and others, connections that allow you to make a home for yourself in the world and to make the world more habitable for others. Thank you all and congratulations.